Uncover Poirot's Secrets, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot reveals thrilling mysteries. In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Manor, a scream pierces the autumn night. A man lies dead, his throat slit in a locked room, a bloodied letter opener at his side. Was it the desperate heir, drowning in debt? The scorned widow, hiding her past? Or the timid governess, clutching a locket that holds a deadly secret? As the fog closes in, only one man can unravel the truth. Hercule Poirot, whose little gray cells see what others miss. But in a house of lies, where every clue misleads, can you guess the murderer before the final twist? Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthorn Manor. The late autumn of 1929 had draped Devonshire in a tapestry of crimson and gold, and Blackthorn Manor stood as a proud relic amidst the rolling hills. Its Elizabethan facade, with ivy clinging to weathered stone and tall chimneys piercing the overcast sky, exuded an air of faded grandeur. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the steadfast companion of Hercule Poirot, found himself drawn to this isolated estate by an unexpected invitation from its mistress, Lady Eleanor Blackthorn. The letter, penned in elegant script, promised a weekend of stimulating company and restful retreat, though Hastings sensed an undercurrent of urgency beneath its polished words. As his taxi crunched along the gravel drive, Hastings took in the manor's imposing silhouette against the gathering dusk. The air was sharp with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke, and a faint mist curled around the ancient yews flanking the entrance. He was greeted by Lady Eleanor herself, a tall woman of perhaps 50, her emerald eyes bright but guarded, her smile a touch too practiced. "Captain Hastings, how delightful," she said, her voice smooth as the claret she offered. "We are a small but lively party this weekend." The guests, as Hastings soon discovered, were a curious assembly, each seemingly plucked from a different corner of society. At dinner, served in a dining room aglow with candlelight and heavy with the scent of polished oak, he observed them closely. Dr. Simon Caldwell, a broad-shouldered physician with a gruff manner, swirled his whiskey with a restless hand, his eyes darting to the others as if diagnosing their secrets. Miss Clara Wentworth, a novelist whose sharp prose had recently stirred London's drawing rooms, wielded her wit like a blade, her laughter bright but edged. Mr. Lionel Drake, a financier with a sallow complexion and a nervous tic at the corner of his mouth, spoke little but watched much presence at the table. Finally, Mr. Harold Grayson, the family solicitor, sat with the quiet authority of a man accustomed to secrets, his spectacles catching the candlelight as he offered measured remarks. The meal was exquisite. Roast pheasant, glazed carrots, and a velvety claret. But the atmosphere was taut, like a violin string stretched to breaking. Lady Eleanor presided with grace, though Hastings noted her frequent glances toward the empty chair at the table's head. "My brother, Sir Reginald Blackthorn, is indisposed this evening," she explained, her tone light but her fingers tightening on her glass. "He keeps to himself, I'm afraid, but he sends his regards." The guest nodded politely, though Clara's raised eyebrow and Lionel's fleeting smirk suggested skepticism. Conversation danced around safe topics: the weather, the London season, Clara's latest novel. but Hastings sensed hidden currents. Julian spoke too quickly of his plans to modernize the estate, earning a sharp look from Grayson. Beatrice's mention of a recent trip to Paris drew a curt remark from Caldwell about frivolous spending. Emily, silent and less addressed, clutched her fork as if it were an anchor. The clock on the mantel ticked toward 9, its steady rhythm a counterpoint to the growing tension. Then, a scream tore through the manor, sharp and chilling, like glass shattering in the night. The guests froze, forks suspended, eyes wide. It came from the library, a room at the end of the east wing. Hastings was on his feet first, followed by Julian and Clara, with the others trailing behind. They burst into the library, its heavy oak door ajar, to find Miss Voss trembling in the center of the room, her face ashen. He's dead," she stammered, pointing to an armchair by the fire. Sir Reginald Blackthorne sat slumped, his head tilted back, his throat marred by a clean crimson slash. Blood pooled on his waistcoat, stark against the white of his shirt. A letter opener, its silver handle engraved with a looping J, lay on the rug, its blade stained red. A window stood shattered, cold air seeping in, and a half-burned cigar smoldered in an ashtray. A scrap of paper, torn and crumpled, bore the word debts in a hurried scrawl. Most chillingly, the door's key glinted in the lock. On the inside. Hastings knelt beside the body, his military instincts kicking in. No pulse, no breath. Sir Reginald was gone, and the locked room suggested an impossible crime. The guests crowded the doorway, their faces a gallery of shock, fear, and haste. Challenged the manor, with its locked doors and hidden motives, was now a stage for murder. And Poirot would soon take center stage. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Death. The library, now a grim tableau, was bathed in the flickering light of the fire, casting long shadows that danced across the oak-paneled walls. Sir Reginald Blackthorne's lifeless form seemed almost theatrical, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, the blood on his waistcoat a stark contrast to the room's muted elegance. The letter opener, with its damning J, gleamed accusingly on the rug, while the shattered window admitted a chill that seemed to seep into the bones of everyone present. Captain Hastings, standing near the body, felt the weight of the moment, his mind racing to catalogue the scene before the inevitable chaos of officialdom descended. Within the hour, Inspector Gibbs, the local constable, arrived, his round face flushed from the cold and his manner a mix of determination and unease. A stout man with a walrus mustache, Gibbs was diligent, but lacked the finesse for a crime of such intricacy. "Murder, plain as day," he declared, crouching beside Sir Reginald's body. "Throat cut, clean and deep, no struggle by the look of it." He gestured to the letter opener. "And this belongs to the young Blackthorne, doesn't it?" His eyes narrowed as he glanced at Julian, who stood pale and rigid near the doorway. Hastings, ever observant, noted the other clues. The cigar, its ash still clinging precariously, suggesting recent use. The scrap of paper with debts scrawled in a shaky hand, half tucked under a book on the desk. And a faint smudge of rouge on Sir Reginald's cuff, barely noticeable in the firelight. The locked door and broken window posed a paradox. How could a murderer enter and exit a sealed room? Gibbs, however, seemed fixated on the letter opener, muttering about motive and opportunity. The guests, now suspects, were ushered to the drawing room, their movements restricted to the manor's confines. Gibbs began his inquiries with a blunt efficiency, demanding alibis for the critical window between 8:30 and 9 p.m., when the scream had rung out. Julian, his voice unsteady, claimed he'd been strolling the grounds alone, clearing his head after dinner. Clara Wentworth, with a defiant tilt of her chin, said she was in her room, working on her novel, though she offered no proof. Dr. Caldwell insisted he'd been in the legal documents in his room, undisturbed until the commotion. Gibbs scribbled notes, his suspicions settling on Julian. "The letter opener's yours, lad," he said gruffly. "And word is you've got debts piling up. Sir Reginald was a wealthy man, and you're his heir. Doesn't take a genius to see the picture." Julian's face flushed, his protestations drowned by Gibbs's certainty. The other guests exchanged glances, some relieved, others uneasy, as the constable's accusation hung in the air. Hastings, however, felt a pang of doubt. Gibbs's theory was too tidy, too eager to pin the crime on the obvious suspect. He recalled Poirot's maxim: "The obvious is rarely the truth, mon ami." The rouge on Sir Reginald's cuff, the warm cigar ash, the cryptic note about debts. These were threads in a tapestry far more complex than Gibbs imagined. Hastings slipped away to the hall where a telephone stood and sent a wire to Poirot in London. "Murder at Blackthorn Manor. Locked room. Suspects aplenty. Your grey cells needed urgently. Hastings." As he returned to the drawing room, the guests' voices rose in a cacophony of whispers and accusations. Lady Eleanor, her composure fraying, pleaded for calm, while Clara's sharp tongue cut through the tension with a barbed remark about vultures circling the estate. The manor, once a haven of elegance, now felt like a gilded cage, each occupant hiding secrets behind their polished facades. Hastings glanced at the clock. 10:15 p.m., and knew the night would be long. But with Poirot's arrival imminent, the shadows of Blackthorn Manor would soon yield to the light of his relentless logic. Chapter 3. The arrival of Hercule Poirot. The morning after the murder dawned gray and heavy, the sky over Blackthorn Manor bruised with clouds that threatened rain. A fine mist clung to the grounds, shrouding the yews and lending the estate an air of melancholy secrecy. Captain Hastings, restless after a sleepless night, stood at the manor's front window, watching the gravel drive. At precisely 10 a.m., a sleek Rolls-Royce glided into view, its polished chrome glinting despite the gloom. From it emerged Hercule Poirot, his small, dapper figure a study in precision, patent leather shoes gleaming, black coat immaculate, and his iconic mustache waxed to symmetrical perfection. "Mon ami Hastings," Poirot called, his voice carrying a warmth that belied the grim occasion. His green eyes sparkled with anticipation as he ascended the steps, a small valise in hand. "You have summoned me to a most intriguing puzzle, no? A locked room, a murder." Flicker of anxiety. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you," she said, offering a strained smile. "We are in desperate need of clarity." Poirot bowed, his manner courtly yet probing. "Clarity, madame, is my profession. But first I must see the scene of this tragedy." Hastings led Poirot to the library, now cordoned off by Inspector Gibbs's orders. The room was much as it had been the previous night, though the fire had died, leaving a chill that matched the corpse's stillness. Sir Reginald remained in the armchair, covered by a sheet at Gibbs's insistence, though Poirot lifted it briefly, his expression unreadable. He paced the room with deliberate steps, his eyes darting from the shattered window to the locked door, from the blood-stained letter opener to the cigar ash now cold in its tray. He knelt to examine the scrap of paper marked "Debts," turning it over with a gloved finger. "This word," he murmured. "It is a clue, but not to what it seems." Poirot's attention lingered on the letter opener, its blade oddly clean despite the blood. "Curious," he said softly. "The blood is on the handle, yet the blade is nearly pristine. This weapon, it plays a role, but perhaps not the one we assume." He pocketed the scrap of paper, then turned to the window, noting the jagged edges of the glass and the absence of shards outside. The window. It was broken from within, no? A detail most telling. Inspector Gibbs, hovering nearby, scoffed. "It's plain enough, Monsieur Poirot. The letter opener belongs to young Julian, and he's got motive, debts up to his ears. He was on the grounds, no alibi to speak of." Poirot's smile was polite but dismissive. "Plain, Inspector? The truth is rarely so obliging. I, Hercule Poirot, do not accept the obvious until it has been tested by the little gray cells." He requested a moment alone with Hastings. "Mon ami," he said, his voice low. "This crime is a tapestry of misdirection. The locked door, the broken window, they are props in a clever play. We must observe the actors. Arrange for me to speak with each guest, one by one, in the drawing room. I wish to see their eyes, their hands, their hesitations. The truth lies in the details." As Hastings nodded, Poirot adjusted his tie, his demeanor serene yet charged with purpose. The human heart, Hastings. It betrays itself in the smallest gestures. And in this manner many hearts are hiding something. With that, he stepped toward the drawing room, ready to unravel the secrets of Blackthorn Manor, one meticulous question at a time. Chapter 4. The interviews begin. Hercule Poirot settled in, small notebook balanced on his knee, his fountain pen poised with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, surveyed each guest as they entered, one by one, for what he called a little conversation. Captain Hastings stood by the door, observing with a mix of admiration and curiosity, knowing that Poirot's deceptively simple questions were designed to unravel the human soul. First came Lady Eleanor Blackthorn, her emerald gown replaced by a somber gray dress, though her regal bearing remained intact. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice steady, but her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. "This tragedy has shaken us all. My brother was not without enemies, but to die so brutally." Poirot nodded sympathetically, his head tilted. "Madame, tell me of Sir Reginald's mood in recent days. Was he perhaps troubled?" Lady Eleanor hesitated, her eyes flickering. "He was preoccupied. Business matters, I believe. He spoke of debts, his own and others, but would not elaborate." Poirot's pen scratched a note. "And your whereabouts, madame, at 8:30 p.m. She straightened. "I was in the conservatory, tending to my orchids. Alone, I'm afraid." Her smile was tight, and Poirot's gaze lingered on her trembling hands, before dismissing her with a courteous nod. Next was Julian Blackthorn, his boyish charm dulled by a pallor that spoke of sleeplessness. He slumped into the chair, his fingers drumming nervously. "I didn't do it, Monsieur Poirot," he blurted. "That letter opener, it's mine, yes, but I left it in the study days ago." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Monsieur Julien, you were on the grounds at 8:45, oui? Did you see anyone near the library?" Julian's eyes darted away. "No. It was dark, foggy. I was just walking, trying to think." Poirot leaned forward. "To think of what?" "Your debts, perhaps?" Julian flushed. "Uncle Reginald was going to help me settle them. He promised." Poirot's pen paused, his expression unreadable as he waved Julian out. Dr. Simon Caldwell entered with a scowl, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. "This is a waste of time," he grumbled, sinking into the chair. "I was in the billiard room with Drake, as I told Gibbs." Poirot's smile was disarming. "And yet, monsieur, your cigar was found in the library, its ash still warm at 9:15. Anything revealing last night?" Clara's eyes gleamed. "Sir Reginald was a man of secrets. I saw him argue with Beatrice in the study yesterday. Something about a loan. And Julian's debts? The whole county knows of them." She claimed to have been in her room writing at the time of the murder. Her alibi as solitary as the others. Poirot noted the ink stains on her fingers, his gaze lingering as she left. Mrs. Beatrice Langley followed, her black silk rustling, her diamonds catching the firelight. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her voice was steady. "Sir Reginald was my cousin," she said softly. "We quarreled yesterday, yes, about a debt my late husband owed him. But I was in my room by 8 o'clock, resting." Poirot's head tilted. "And this rouge, madame, on Sir Reginald's cuff. Yours, perhaps?" Beatrice paled, touching her cheek. I don't wear rouge, Monsieur Poirot. Not since my husband's death." Her hands trembled as she clutched her necklace, and Poirot's pen scratched another note. Miss Emily Voss entered like a shadow, her mousy demeanor more pronounced under Poirot's scrutiny. She clutched a locket, her voice barely audible. "I was reading to the children upstairs," she whispered. "I heard nothing until the scream." Poirot's voice was gentle but probing. "Nothing, mademoiselle? Not even footsteps in the hall at 8:30? Emily's eyes widened, her fingers tightening on the locket. I might have heard something, but I thought it was a servant." Poirot's smile was kind, but his eyes missed nothing as she scurried out. Finally, Mr. Harold Grayson, the solicitor, entered with a calm that bordered on indifference. His spectacles glinted as he sat, his answers precise. "I was in my room, reviewing Sir Reginald's will, until the scream at 9 o'clock. Poirot's eyebrow arched. "The will, monsieur? Were there changes afoot?" Grayson's lips thinned. "Minor adjustments, nothing significant." He offered a timeline so exact, 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, undisturbed, that Poirot's pen paused, his gaze sharpening. "Precision, monsieur, is admirable, but the truth, it is sometimes less orderly." As Grayson left, Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Hastings," he said softly. "Each alibi is a thread, and already I see knots. The cigar, the rouge, the footsteps. They whisper of contradiction. We must listen closely." Hastings nodded, marveling at Poirot. Captain Hastings watched his friend, noting the faint smile that played beneath Poirot's meticulously waxed mustache, a sign that the little gray cells were already weaving the threads of the case into a pattern only he could see. Outside, the wind moaned, rattling the manor's ancient panes, while inside, the atmosphere among the guests grew ever more strained. Inspector Gibbs, undeterred by Poirot's presence, had taken decisive action by noon. With a flourish of officialdom, he declared Julian Blackthorne under arrest, the monogrammed letter opener serving as his chief evidence. "It's as clear as crystal," Gibbs announced to the gathered guests, his walrus mustache bristling with conviction. "The boy's in debt, the weapon's his, and he was wandering the grounds with no one to vouch for him. Motive, means, and opportunity, all wrapped up neat as you please, Julian." His face drained of color, protested vehemently, his voice cracking. "I didn't touch him. That letter opener was in the study, not the library. Someone's framing me." But Gibbs, unmoved, had 2 constables escort the young man to a locked guest room, pending transfer to the local station. The other guests, gathered in the drawing room, reacted with a mix of relief and disquiet. Lady Eleanor's hands trembled as she poured tea, her eyes darting to the door as if expecting her nephew to reappear. Clara Wentworth, her novelist's instincts alert, murmured to Hastings, "It's too perfect, isn't it? Like a plot from one of my books. Too tidy to be true." Dr. Caldwell grunted his approval of Gibbs's decision, though his fingers tightened around his glass. Lionel Drake's nervous tic seemed to accelerate, his eyes flitting between the others. Beatrice Langley dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, her diamonds glinting incongruously, while Emily Voss sat silently, her locket clutched like a talisman. Harold Grayson, ever composed, adjusted his spectacles and said little, though his gaze lingered on Poirot. Poirot, however, was not swayed by Gibbs's certainty. Rising from his chair, he paced the room with deliberate steps, his hands clasped behind his back. "Mon ami Hastings," he said softly, ensuring only his friend could hear. "This arrest, it is a distraction, a red herring, as you English say. The letter opener, it is too obvious, too convenient. I, Hercule Poirot, do not trust the solution that presents itself so eagerly." Hastings nodded, recalling Poirot's disdain for conclusions that required no thought. "But what about the clues?" he whispered. "The cigar, the rouge, the note." Poirot's mind. In the library, Poirot's attention was drawn to a new discovery. A tiny pearl earring caught in the fringe of the rug near the shattered window. It was delicate, unassuming, yet its presence was a spark in Poirot's mind. He held it up to the light, his expression one of quiet triumph. "This, Hastings," he said, "is not a jewel one wears carelessly. It belongs to someone in this house, and it was not here by accident." Back in the drawing room, Poirot did not mention the earring, but instead observed the guests with renewed intensity. He noted Beatrice's bare earlobes despite her penchant for jewelry, and Emily's nervous habit of touching her ears when questioned. Clara, too, wore no earrings, her style favoring bold brooches instead. Lady Eleanor's jewelry was grand but accounted for, and the men, naturally, wore none. "The earring," Poirot murmured to Hastings. "It is a clue to a presence, perhaps a deception. We shall see." As the afternoon waned, Gibbs's certainty and Julian's guilt seemed to embolden the guests, who began to relax, their conversations turning to trivialities. But Poirot's presence cast a shadow, his calm demeanor a silent reminder that the case was far from closed. "Hastings," he said as they retired to a quiet corner, "the murderer wishes us to believe Julian is guilty, to look no further. But I, Poirot, see beyond the curtain they have drawn. The earring, the cigar, the rouge, they are pieces of a puzzle that does not yet fit the shape of Julian's guilt." Hastings, ever loyal, felt a surge of confidence in his friend's methods. "What's next, Poirot?" he asked. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "We watch, mon ami. We listen. The guilty one will betray themselves, not with words but with the silence between them." As the rain drummed against the windows, Poirot's eyes scanned the room, his mind already piecing together the contradictions that would lead to the truth hidden within Blackthorn Manor's walls. Chapter 6. The Inconsistency Revealed. The second day at Blackthorn Manor dawned with a relentless drizzle, the gray light filtering through the tall windows, casting a pallor over the gathered guests. The air was heavy with suspicion, each glance between them laced with unspoken accusations. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the gloom, sat in the drawing room, his notebook open, his pen tracing precise lines as he reviewed his notes. Captain Hastings, standing by the fire, marveled at his friend's serene concentration amidst the chaos of a murder investigation. The arrest of Julian Blackthorn had settled nothing. Rather, it had tightened the knot of tension within. "This detail, Hastings," he said, his voice low. "It is like a single wrong note in a symphony. We must find its source." He requested a thorough inspection of the hall outside the library, and Hastings accompanied him, watching as Poirot's keen eyes scanned the polished floorboards. Near the library door, Poirot paused, crouching to examine a faint scuff mark on the wood, barely visible in the dim light. "Regardez, Hastings," he murmured, tracing the mark with a gloved finger. "A shoe, perhaps, lingering here. Someone stood in this spot, listening or waiting, before the crime." He straightened, his gaze drifting to the library's locked door, then back to the scuff. "This mark, it is fresh. It speaks of presence, of intent." Returning to the library, Poirot revisited the cigar ash, which had so puzzled him the previous day. The ashtray, now cold, still held the half-burned cigar, its rare Cuban brand a detail that did not escape him. "Dr. Caldwell claims he smoked here at 7:30, Poirot said, his tone skeptical. "Yet the ash was warm when we arrived at 9:15. A cigar does not burn so long unless tended. Someone was here later, much later." He turned to Hastings, his eyes gleaming. "This, mon ami, is no coincidence. It is a lie." Poirot summoned Dr. Caldwell for a second interview, his manner polite but unyielding. The physician entered the drawing room with a scowl, his broad frame filling the chair. "I've told you everything," he snapped, his hands clenched. Poirot's smile was disarming. "Not quite, monsieur. The cigar in the library. Your brand, oui? Your brand, oui? You said you left it at 7:30, yet the ash was warm at 9:15. How do you explain this?" Caldwell's face flushed, his fingers tightening. I may have misjudged the time. I was distracted, had a headache." Poirot's eyebrow arched. "A headache that clouds the memory of a physician?" "Most curious." Caldwell offered no further defense, his departure marked by a muttered curse. Poirot's next focus was the scrap of paper marked "Debts," which he had pocketed the previous day. He examined it under a magnifying glass, noting the hurried scrawl and the faint impression of another word beneath it partially erased. "This paper," he told Hastings. It was torn from a larger sheet, perhaps a letter. "The word debts is a message, but to whom? And why leave it so conspicuously?" He tucked the paper away, his mind clearly turning over possibilities. Later, Poirot gathered the guests briefly to clarify the timeline, his questions sharp yet delivered with a velvet touch. "Hall, when you came down?" Emily shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. Hastings, watching the exchange, sensed Poirot was closing in on something. "What is it, Poirot?" he asked later, as they stood alone in the hall. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The footsteps, the cigar, the paper. They are not random, Hastings. They point to a presence in the library before the scream. A presence that contradicts the alibis. Someone was there, planning or observing, and they have not admitted it." He tapped his temple. "The little gray cells. They are beginning to see the shape of this crime." As the rain continued to fall, Poirot's calm certainty stood in stark contrast to the growing unease among the guests. The scuff mark, the cigar ash, and Emily's hesitant testimony were like cracks in a facade, and Poirot was determined to pry them open. "The truth, mon ami," he said, his voice soft but resolute. "It hides in these inconsistencies." "We are close, Hastings. Very close." With that, he turned back to his notebook, ready to pursue the next thread in the intricate tapestry of Blackthorn Manor's deadly secrets. Chapter 7. Secrets and Lies. The rain had ceased by the evening of the second day, leaving Blackthorn Manor shrouded in a damp silence that seemed to amplify the undercurrents of distrust among its inhabitants. The drawing room, once a haven of civility, now felt like a stage where each guest played a part, their polite masks slipping under the weight of suspicion. Hercule Poirot, ever the maestro of such scenes, sat with his notebook closed, his green eyes scanning the room as if reading the invisible script of human motives. Captain Hastings, standing near the window, felt the tension like a tightening noose. Sensing that Poirot's relentless probing was about to unearth truths the suspects would rather keep buried. The day's inquiries had stirred the pot, and secrets began to spill like ink from an upturned bottle. Poirot, with his knack for asking the right question at the wrong moment, had arranged an informal gathering after dinner, ostensibly to clarify certain points. The guests, weary and on edge, complied, their faces a gallery of guarded expressions. Inspector Gibbs, still convinced of Julian Blackthorn's guilt, hovered at the edge of the room, his presence a reminder of the law's impatience. Poirot began with Clara Wentworth, whose sharp tongue had thus far deflected scrutiny. "Mademoiselle," he said, his voice smooth as velvet, "you are a keen observer of human nature, non? Did you, perhaps, see something in the days before the murder that struck you as unusual?" Clara's eyes narrowed, her novelist's instinct sensing a trap, glinting as she clutched her handkerchief. "How dare you?" she cried. "It was a family matter, nothing more." Poirot's gaze shifted to Beatrice, his head tilted. "A family matter, madame? Perhaps you could enlighten us. Sir Reginald was your cousin, oui. But what was the nature of this disagreement?" Beatrice's lips trembled, her composure fraying. "My late husband owed him money," she admitted, her voice low. "Reginald refused to forgive the debt, even after all these years. I begged him to reconsider, but he was adamant. Her eyes darted to the floor, and Poirot noted the faint flush on her cheeks, as if more remained unsaid. Turning to Lionel Drake, Poirot's tone grew sharper. "Monsieur Drake, you are a man of finance, yet your hands, they tremble when Sir Reginald's name is mentioned. Was there business between you?" Lionel's tic became pronounced, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm. "We had a deal," he confessed, his voice strained. "A land investment that went sour. Reginald blamed me, threatened to ruin my reputation if I didn't repay him." The admission hung in the air, drawing sharp glances from the others. Clara's eyebrow arched, as if adding a note to her mental manuscript. Poirot's attention then fell on Emily Voss, who shrank under his scrutiny. "Mademoiselle Voss," he said gently, "you heard footsteps at 8:30, yet you hesitated to speak of them. Was there something else you heard or saw?" Emily's hands twisted around her locket, her voice barely a whisper. I heard voices in the library, just before the footsteps. Sir Reginald's, and another, low, angry. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman." The room stilled, the guests exchanging wary looks. Poirot's pen scratched a note, his expression unreadable. Harold Grayson, the solicitor, remained impassive, but Poirot's next question caught him off guard. "Monsieur Grayson, you reviewed Sir Reginald's will on the night of the murder. Were there changes that might have upset someone?" Grayson adjusted his spectacles, his voice cool. "The will was standard. Julian was the primary heir, with provisions for Lady Eleanor and minor bequests to others. No changes were pending. Yet his eyes flicked briefly to Beatrice, a gesture Poirot did not miss. As the gathering dispersed, the revelations left a bitter taste. Hastings, watching the guests retire to their rooms, felt the manor's walls closing in. "Poirot," he said quietly, "they're all hiding something. Debts, feuds, secrets." Hastings. It was not dropped by accident. It was placed, perhaps to mislead. And the voices Emily heard, they are the key to the murderer's identity. His eyes gleamed with the thrill of the chase. "The lies, Hastings, they are piling up, but they will collapse under the weight of the truth." As the manor settled into an uneasy silence, Poirot's mind worked tirelessly, piecing together the contradictions, the scuff mark, the cigar ash, the voices in the library. The secrets of Blackthorn Manor were surfacing, and with them, the shadow of the murderer grew clearer, though still just out of reach. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The third morning at Blackthorn Manor brought a fragile calm, as if the estate itself were holding its breath. The rain had cleared, leaving the air crisp and the ground sparkling with dew. But the atmosphere within remained thick with suspicion. The guests, worn by days of scrutiny, moved like actors in a play nearing its climax, their polite facades crumbling under the strain. Hercule Poirot, ever composed, sat in the drawing room, his notebook now filled with meticulous observations, his green eyes alight with the certainty that the truth was near. Captain Hastings, standing by the mantel, felt the weight of the case pressing down, sensing that Poirot's relentless probing was about to crack the manor's secrets wide open. The previous evening's revelations had left the guests rattled. Clara's accusation against Beatrice, Lionel's confession of a failed deal, and Emily's hesitant mention of voices in the library had woven a web of motives and mistrust. Inspector Gibbs, still convinced of Julian Blackthorn's guilt, had doubled down, interrogating the young man further. But Poirot's quiet confidence suggested otherwise. "The truth, Hastings," he had murmured before retiring. "It is like a dam. One crack and it all comes flooding out. The crack came unexpectedly at mid-morning, when Emily Voss, pale and trembling, sought out Poirot in the drawing room. Her locket dangled from her shaking hands, her eyes red from crying. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't bear it any longer. I lied about my alibi." The room seemed to still, even the ticking of the clock fading into the background. Hastings leaned forward, his heart racing, as Poirot's expression remained serene, though his eyes sharpened with interest. "Speak, mademoiselle," he said gently. "The truth. It is a burden you must release." Emily sank into a chair, her voice barely audible. "I wasn't upstairs with the children at 8:45. As I said, I was in the library, delivering a book Sir Reginald had requested. With Julian arrested and everyone pointing fingers, tears spilled down her cheeks, and she clutched the locket as if it could anchor her. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. "And this betrayal, mademoiselle, what did Sir Reginald say, precisely?" Emily's eyes widened, fear mingling with her confession. "He said, 'They think they can ruin me, but I'll have the last word.' I couldn't hear more. The children called for me upstairs and I left." She hesitated, then added, "There was someone else in the hall as I left." I heard footsteps again, heavier, near the library door. Hastings exchanged a glance with Poirot, recalling the scuff mark on the floorboard. Poirot's pen scratched a note, his demeanor calm, but his mind clearly racing. "Merci, mademoiselle," he said, his tone kind yet firm. "Your courage, it has moved us closer to the truth. But, tell me, this locket you hold so tightly, what is its significance?" Emily's hand froze, her face paling further. "It's a keepsake," she stammered. "From someone dear, long ago." Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on the locket's worn surface, as if it held a story of its own. Emily's confession sent ripples through the manor. When the other guests learned of it, their reactions ranged from shock to suspicion. Clara Wentworth, ever the observer, murmured to Hastings, "She's cleverer than she looks, that one." A confession to hide a bigger lie, perhaps? Beatrice Langley, overhearing, clutched her diamonds, her voice sharp. "She was in the library? Then why point fingers at me?" Dr. Caldwell's scowl deepened, while Lionel Drake's tic seemed to pulse with every word. Lady Eleanor, her composure fraying, whispered to Grayson, "What does this mean for Julian?" The solicitor's response was a curt shake of his head. Poirot, however, saw Emily's breakdown as a turning point. "Hastings," he said later, as they stood in the library, "her confession, it is not the whole truth, but it is a crack in the facade. The footsteps she heard, the scuff mark, the voices, they confirm someone else was near the library at the critical moment. And this locket," he paused, his eyes narrowing, "it is more than a keepsake, I think. It binds her to someone in this house." He re-examined the library, his attention drawn to the pearl earring, still tucked safely in his pocket. "This earring," he mused, "it was placed to mislead, perhaps to implicate another. And the cigar ash, so warm at 9:15. It points to Dr. Caldwell's lie about his own thoughts. Their secrets heavier than ever." Poirot, undaunted, prepared for the next phase of his investigation, his little gray cells working tirelessly to uncover the truth hidden within Blackthorn Manor's shadowed halls. Chapter 9. The Trap is Set. By the afternoon of the third day, Blackthorn Manor seemed to pulse with an electric tension, as if the very walls anticipated the unraveling of its secrets. The guests, worn by sleepless nights and Poirot's relentless probing, gathered in the drawing room at his request, their faces a mix of dread and defiance. Hercule Poirot stood before them, his small frame commanding the room with an authority that belied his stature. His mustache was impeccably waxed, his patent leather shoes gleamed, and his green eyes sparkled with the certainty of a man who had glimpsed the truth. Captain Hastings, seated near the fire, felt a thrill of anticipation, knowing Poirot was about to spring a trap as meticulous as it was psychological. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and measured. "We stand on the precipice of truth. A man has been murdered in this house, and the murderer is among us. I, Hercule Poirot, have observed, listened, and thought deeply with my little gray cells. Now, I shall lay before you the pieces of this puzzle, and we shall see who flinches." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze sweeping over the assembled guests. Lady Eleanor, her hands folded tightly. Clara Wentworth, her sharp eyes narrowed. Dr. Caldwell, his scowl deepening. Lionel Drake, his tic betraying his nerves. Beatrice Langley, her diamonds glinting as she clutched her handkerchief. Emily Voss, pale and clutching her locket. And Harold Grayson, his spectacles reflecting the firelight. Inspector Gibbs stood by the door, arms crossed, skeptical but attentive. Julian Blackthorn, released from confinement at Poirot's insistence but still under watch, sat rigidly, his eyes pleading for vindication. Poirot held up the pearl earring, its delicate sheen catching the light. "This," he said, "was found in the library, near the shattered window. A clue, perhaps, left to mislead. To whom does it belong?" He paused, watching their faces. Beatrice's hand flew to her ear, her voice trembling. I lost a pearl earring last week, Monsieur Poirot, but I swear, it wasn't in the library." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Précisément, madame. And yet, this earring was found after the murder. Curious, no?" He turned to the cigar ash, recounting its warmth at 9:15 p.m., contradicting Dr. Caldwell's claim of smoking at 7:30. Caldwell shifted uncomfortably, his protest drowned by Poirot's next revelation. The scuff mark in the hall, evidence of someone lingering near the library at 8:30. "And Mademoiselle Voss," Poirot continued, his tone, "it suggests a motive. Greed, desperation. But whose debts? Monsieur Julian's, perhaps, or another's?" He paused, his gaze locking on Lionel Drake, whose tic accelerated. "Monsieur Drake, your failed deal with Sir Reginald. Was it not a debt you could not repay?" Lionel's face paled, but he remained silent. Then Poirot turned to the letter opener, its monogrammed J a damning clue in Gibbs's eyes. "This weapon," he said. "It was placed to point to Monsieur Julian. But the blood, it is on the handle, not the blade, a curious detail for a murder weapon, no? It suggests a staging, a deception." Gibbs scoffed, but Poirot's eyes never wavered. "The murderer," he declared, "wished us to look at Julian, to stop looking elsewhere. But I, Poirot, see beyond the obvious." He stepped closer to the group, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. "I ask you now, who among you has a secret tied to this locket?" He gestured to Emily, whose hand froze on the silver trinket. "And who was in the library, unseen, before the scream at 9 o'clock? The room fell silent, the guests' faces a gallery of fear, guilt, and calculation. Beatrice's handkerchief tore slightly in her grip, Caldwell's jaw clenched. Clara's eyes darted to Emily, who seemed to shrink into herself. Poirot's trap was set, not with accusations, but with questions that pierced the heart. "The truth," he said. "It cannot hide forever. One of you knows more than you have said. Speak now, or the little gray cells will speak for you." The silence was deafening, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Hastings held his breath, sensing the murderer's composure cracking under Poirot's relentless pressure. The stage was set for the final act, and Poirot's gaze, like a spotlight, searched for the one who would falter. Chapter 10. The Genius Reveal. The drawing room of Blackthorn Manor was a cauldron of tension, the air thick with anticipation as Hercule Poirot stood at its center, his small figure radiating an almost theatrical authority. The fire cast flickering shadows across the faces of the gathered guests, each one taut with apprehension or defiance. Captain Hastings, seated near the mantel, felt his pulse quicken, knowing that Poirot's methodical mind had reached its crescendo. The Belgian detective's green eyes gleamed with the certainty of truth, his mustache twitching slightly as he prepared to unravel the mystery of Sir Reginald Blackthorn's murder. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice steady and resonant, "we have danced around the truth long enough. A man lies dead, his life taken in this very house, and the murderer sits among us." Strained. Clara Wentworth, her sharp eyes wary. Dr. Caldwell, his scowl deepening. Lionel Drake, his nervous tic betraying him. Beatrice Langley, clutching her torn handkerchief. Emily Voss, her locket trembling in her hands. Harold Grayson, his spectacles glinting impassively. And Julian Blackthorne, his face a mask of desperate hope. Inspector Gibbs stood by the door, his skepticism tempered by curiosity. Poirot held up the monogrammed letter opener, its silver J catching the firelight. "This," he said, "was meant to accuse Monsieur Julien. Its bloodied handle, yet curiously clean blade, tells us it was not the murder weapon, but a prop, placed to mislead. The true weapon, a thin, sharp blade, perhaps a surgical knife, was removed by the killer." Gibbs shifted uncomfortably, but Poirot pressed on. "The window, broken from within, and the locked door suggest an impossible crime." But it was not impossible, only clever. He turned to the cigar ash, its warmth a lingering mystery. "Dr. Caldwell, you claim to have smoked in the library at 7:30, yet the ash was warm at 9:15. You were there later, monsieur, closer to the murder. Why lie?" Caldwell's face reddened, but he remained silent, his hands clenched. Poirot's gaze shifted to the scrap of paper marked "Debts." This note, torn and conspicuous, points to motive. But whose debts? Monsieur Julien's or another's, hidden in plain sight? Poirot then produced the pearl earring, holding it delicately. "This earring, found in the library, does not belong to Madame Beatrice, as she claimed to have lost hers earlier. No, it belongs to someone else. Someone who wished to cast suspicion elsewhere." He paused, his eyes locking on Emily Voss, who shrank back, her locket clutched tightly. "Mademoiselle Voss, you were in the library at 8:45, delivering a book to Sir Reginald. You heard voices, footsteps, and this locket, its significance, it ties you to the past, does it not?" Emily's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't kill him," she cried. "I swear it." Poirot's voice softened, but his words were relentless. "No, mademoiselle, but you know more than you have said. The locket. It is a gift from Madame Beatrice from years ago. When you were her maid, Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, and Emily nodded, sobbing. She gave it to me. Before I came here. The weight of his words settled. The footsteps at 8:30. The scuff mark. They were hers, planning her act. The earring, a gift from Beatrice, was placed to cast suspicion on her former mistress, a final act of spite. The cigar ash. Dr. Caldwell, you were in the library at 8:50, witnessing the aftermath. But you lied to protect your own secrets. A failed investment with Sir Reginald, perhaps? Caldwell's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Emily, however, broke, her sobs echoing in the silent room. I didn't mean to, she wailed. He was going to ruin me, send me away. I took the blade from the study. I panicked. She collapsed, the locket falling open to reveal a faded photograph of her and Beatrice, young and smiling. Poirot's voice was calm but firm. The voices, the betrayal Sir Reginald spoke of, it was Emily's theft, a secret he uncovered. The debts note was a distraction, written by Emily to confuse us. The locked room? She slipped out through the window, breaking it from within to suggest an outside intruder, then returned through the hall to discover the body. Gibbs, stunned, stepped forward, his skepticism replaced by grudging respect. You've got your killer, Monsieur Poirot, he said, signaling to his constables to take Emily. The other guests sat in shocked silence, their secrets exposed but their guilt absolved. Julian's shoulders sagged with relief while Beatrice's tears fell silently, her past with Emily a wound reopened. Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression serene. The heart, mon ami. It betrays itself in the smallest details. Order and method, they never fail. As Emily was led away, the manor seemed to exhale, its secrets laid bare by the genius of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The evening following Emily Voss's confession settled over Blackthorn Manor like a heavy curtain, the air now free of the oppressive tension that had gripped it for days. The fire in the drawing room burned low, casting a soft glow over the oak-paneled walls, and the guests had dispersed to their rooms, their faces marked by a mix of relief and disquiet. Hercule Poirot sat in a high-backed chair, a cup of tisane cradled in his hands, his green eyes distant, yet serene. Captain Hastings, seated across from him, felt the weight of the case lift, replaced by a quiet awe at his friend's brilliance. The manor, though still grand, seemed diminished without its secrets, as if the truth had stripped away its mystique. Outside, the Devonshire night was clear, the stars piercing the velvet sky, a stark contrast to the fog and rain that had cloaked the estate during the investigation. Hastings broke the silence, his strike with a ferocity that surprises even itself. Poirot sipped his tisane, his gaze fixed on the fire. Consider, Hastings, the simplicity of this crime, yet its complexity. Emily Voss, she was driven by fear of losing her place, her dignity. A small theft, long buried, became her undoing when Sir Reginald uncovered it. She planned her act with care, the letter opener to frame Julian, the broken window to suggest an intruder, the pearl earring to implicate Beatrice. Yet she could not hide the scuff mark, the voices, the locket that betrayed her past. Hastings nodded, still piecing it together. And the cigar ash? Dr. Caldwell's lie. What was he hiding? Poirot's smile widened. A minor sin, mon ami. Caldwell was in the library, yes, but not to kill. He was there to confront Sir Reginald about their failed investment. A confrontation that ended in harsh words, not blood. His lie was born of shame, not guilt. The ash, it was his carelessness, but it helped us see the timeline clearly. Poirot set down his cup, his voice taking on a philosophical tone. The human heart, Hastings. It is a labyrinth. Emily killed to protect her pride. But pride is a fragile thing. It builds castles of lies, only to crumble under the weight of truth. The locket. It was her anchor to a happier past with Beatrice, yet it became her chain. We all carry such chains, Nom. Hastings leaned back, reflecting on the case. It's a pity, really. Emily seems so harmless. And Beatrice, those tears at the end, they were real, weren't they? Poirot nodded, his expression softening. We, Hastings. Beatrice mourned not just for Sir Reginald, but for Emily, the girl she once knew. Their bond. It was broken long ago, but the heart remembers. Poirot rose, adjusting his impeccable coat. This case, it reminds us that order and method, they are the tools of justice. The clues, they were all there. The scuff mark, the ash, the earring, the voices, each a note in a symphony, played out of tune until the little gray cells brought harmony. He paused, his eyes twinkling. And now, mon ami, I crave the simplicity of London, a good book, and perhaps a chocolat show. Hastings chuckled, rising to join him. You've earned it, Poirot. But I wager you'll be itching for another puzzle by next week. Poirot's laugh was soft, almost musical. Perhaps, Hastings. The world, it is full of puzzles, and I, Hercule Poirot, am never far from their solution. Pale sun breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows across the dew-soaked lawns. The guests, though freed from the specter of suspicion, moved with a subdued air. Their conversations hushed as they prepared to leave the estate that had become a stage for tragedy. Hercule Poirot, however, lingered in the drawing room, his small valise packed but his mind still turning over the case. Captain Hastings, ever attentive, sensed that his friend was not entirely satisfied, despite Emily Voss's confession. Poirot, he ventured. The case is solved, isn't it? Emily's confessed, the clues fit. What's troubling you? Poirot's green eyes narrowed, his fingers tapping lightly on the arm of his chair. Mon ami, he said softly. The puzzle is complete, yet there is one thread, a small one but persistent, that does not sit neatly in the tapestry. The locket, Hastings. It tells a story beyond Emily's crime, a story we have not fully heard. He rose, his movements deliberate, and requested a final walk through the library before their departure. The library, now stripped of its grim tableau, felt strangely hollow. The armchair where Sir Reginald had died standing empty by the cold hearth. Poirot paced the room, his gaze lingering on the spot where the pearl earring had been found. This earring, he murmured, producing it from his pocket. It was placed to implicate Beatrice, oui. But why this earring? Why not another trinket? He turned to the scuff mark in the hall, still faintly visible, and then to the window, its broken pane now boarded up. And the voices Emily heard, angry, indistinct. There is something more, Hastings, a shadow behind the crime. Poirot summoned Lady Eleanor, who appeared in the library with a weary grace, her emerald eyes clouded with fatigue. Madame, Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing, you have been most cooperative, but there is one matter left. The locket Mademoiselle Voss held so dear. It was a gift from Madame Beatrice, from a time when they were close. But you too knew Emily before she came to Blackthorn Manor, did you not? Lady Eleanor's face paled, her hands clasping tightly. I recommended her for the governess position, she admitted. She was Beatrice's maid years ago, before my cousin's marriage. I thought it a kindness to offer her a place here. Poirot's head tilted, his eyes sharp. And Sir Reginald, he knew of her past, oui? Did he know of a connection between you, Beatrice, and Emily? A connection that might have threatened his plans? Lady Eleanor hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. Reginald Hastings. The locket. It is not just a keepsake. It is a link to a shared past. Emily, Beatrice, and Eleanor. Sir Reginald's discovery of Emily's theft was not just a threat to her, but to the fragile bond between these women. Emily killed to protect more than her position. She killed to protect a secret they all shared. Hastings frowned, puzzled. But what secret, Poirot? The theft was minor, wasn't it? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Minor in value, perhaps, but not in meaning. The theft was a betrayal of trust, a wound to Beatrice and Eleanor, who had treated Emily as family. Sir Reginald's threat to expose her would have unraveled their carefully guarded history. Emily's panic was not just for herself, but for the shame it would bring them all. Poirot pocketed the earring, his gaze distant. The crime is solved, Hastings, but the human heart, it is never so simple. Emily's act was one of desperation, but it was born of loyalty twisted into fear. The locket, the earring, they are symbols of a bond that survived even murder. He straightened, his demeanor resolute. We have done our duty, mon ami. The truth is known, and justice will follow. But the heart, it carries its own justice. As they prepared to leave, Hastings glanced back at the manor, its ivy-clad walls now bathed in sunlight. Will they recover from this, Poirot? He asked. Poirot's eyes softened. In time, perhaps. The truth heals, but it also scars. They will carry this as we all carry our truths. With that, he stepped toward the waiting Rolls-Royce, his mind already turning to the next puzzle, leaving Blackthorn Manor to its quiet healing. Chapter 13. The Echoes of the Past. The late morning sun bathed Blackthorn Manor in a golden glow, softening the harsh edges of its Elizabethan facade as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings prepared to depart. The gravel drive crunched underfoot, and the air carried the fresh scent of damp grass, a stark contrast to the stifling tension that had gripped the estate. The guests, now free to leave, lingered in the entrance hall, their farewells subdued, their eyes shadowed by the weight of the past days. Poirot, however, remained in the library for one final moment, his small figure framed by the tall bookshelves, his gaze fixed on the armchair where Sir Reginald Blackthorn had met his end. Hastings, ever loyal, stood by his side, sensing that his friend's mind was still tethered to the case, chasing a final elusive thread. Poirot, Hastings ventured, breaking the silence. You've solved the murder. Older than this murder. A story I must understand before we leave. Poirot requested a private word with Beatrice Langley, who entered the library with a hesitant step, her black silk dress rustling, her diamonds absent in the morning light. Her face, usually composed, bore the marks of sleeplessness, her eyes red-rimmed from tears shed in private. Madame, Poirot began, his tone gentle yet piercing. You have lost more than a cousin in Sir Reginald. The locket Mademoiselle Emily held, it was yours. Given in friendship years ago, was it not? Beatrice's hand trembled, her voice barely audible. Yes. I gave it to her when she was my maid, before I married. She was like a sister to me, until... Her words trailed off and she looked away, her gaze fixed on the boarded-up window. Until, Poirot prompted, his head tilted. Beatrice's lips tightened, then parted in a sigh. Until she stole from me. A brooch, a trifle. But it broke my trust. I sent her away, but Eleanor, my cousin, took pity on her, gave her a place here. I never told Reginald the truth. For her sake. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. And when Sir Reginald discovered her theft, he threatened to expose her. Did he know of your shared past? Beatrice's eyes widened, then softened with resignation. He suspected something. He was cruel, Monsieur Poirot, always probing for weaknesses. He said Emily was unfit to serve in this house, that she'd shame us all. Poirot's pen scratched a final note in his notebook. Merci, madame. Your candor completes the picture. Emily's crime was not just for herself, but to protect a bond you all cherished, though it was broken. Beatrice nodded, tears spilling silently, and left the library with a quiet dignity. As Poirot and Hastings stepped into the hall, they found Lady Eleanor waiting, her emerald eyes searching Poirot's face. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice steady but strained. You've brought us justice, but at what cost? Emily. She was one of us once. Poirot bowed slightly, his tone solemn. Madame, the cost of truth is always high, but it is necessary. Emily's act was born of fear, but also of loyalty to a past you shared. The locket. It was her reminder of that love, twisted though it became. Hastings, listening, felt a pang of sympathy for the women whose lives had been entangled by secrets. It's tragic, Poirot, he said as they walked toward the Rolls-Royce. They were like a family, and now it's all shattered. Poirot's smile was wistful. Oui, Hastings, but the hard past, mon ami, he said. It is a shadow that follows us all. In this case, it cast a long shadow indeed. Hastings nodded, the manner fading from view. Its secrets now laid bare, but its wounds still raw, carried forward by those who remained. Chapter 14. The Final Farewell. The Rolls-Royce purred along the winding Devonshire roads, carrying Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings away from Blackthorn Manor as the sun climbed higher, bathing the countryside in a warm, golden light. The estate, with its ivy-clad walls and brooding chimneys, faded into the distance, a monument to secrets unveiled and lives forever altered. Inside the car, the air was quiet, save for the soft hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of Poirot's notebook as he leafed through its pages. Hastings, gazing out at the rolling hills, felt the weight of the case linger, its emotional echoes resonating like a half-remembered melody. Poirot, Hastings said, breaking the silence. You've tied up every loose end, haven't you? Emily's confession, the locket, the earring, it all fits. Yet I can't shake the feeling that there's something more, something we've missed. Poirot's mustache twitched, his green eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and melancholy. Mon ami, he replied, his voice soft. You are perceptive. The case is solved, the murderer unmasked. But the human heart, it leaves traces that no solution can erase. There is always something more, Hastings, in the stories we cannot fully tell. Poirot closed his notebook with a decisive snap, his gaze drifting to the horizon. Consider the women of Blackthorn Manor, Emily, Beatrice, Eleanor. Their bond, forged in youth, was a fragile thing, broken by betrayal yet preserved in memory. Emily's crime was not just for her own survival, but to protect a past she could not let go. The locket, the earring, they were not mere clues but symbols of love turned to pain. He paused, his fingers steepled. This case, it reminds us that justice, it is not always healing. It lays bare the wounds, but it does not mend them. Hastings nodded, his thoughts turning to the guest they had left behind. Lady Eleanor, her regal demeanor cracked by grief for her brother and pity for Emily. Beatrice, haunted by a friendship lost to time and mistrust. Julian, freed from suspicion but burdened by his uncle's legacy. And the others, Clara, Caldwell, Drake, Grayson, each carrying their own secrets, exposed yet unresolved. What will become of them, Poirot? Hastings asked. Can they go on after this? Poirot's smile was wistful. Hastings, we have brought order to chaos, as is my method. The rest, it is for them to bear. As the car neared the train station, Poirot's thoughts turned briefly to the clues that had led him to the truth. The scuff mark in the hall, the warm cigar ash, the pearl earring, the locket's hidden photograph. Each had played its part, a note in the symphony of deduction that only he could conduct. Yet it was the human element, the tangled loyalties, the buried betrayals, that lingered in his mind. The little gray cells, he mused aloud. They solve the crime, but the heart, it tells the story. The station came into view, its platform bustling with travelers unaware of the drama that had unfolded at Blackthorn Manor. Poirot stepped from the car, his valise in hand, his posture as erect as ever. Come, Hastings, he said, his voice brightening. London awaits, with its comforts and, perhaps, a new puzzle to challenge the mind. Hastings chuckled, following his friend onto the platform. You never tire of it, do you, Poirot? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Never, mon ami. The world is full of mysteries, and I, Hercule Poirot, am their servant. As the train's whistle sounded, signaling their departure, Hastings cast one last glance toward the distant hills where Blackthorn Manor stood. The case was closed, the truth revealed, but its echoes would linger, a reminder of the fragile threads that bind human hearts, and the devastating consequences when they snap. Chapter 15. The Quiet Exit. The train to London clattered through the Devonshire countryside, its rhythmic sway a soothing counterpoint to the tumult of the past days at Blackthorn Manor. Hercule Poirot sat by the window, his small frame nestled comfortably in the plush seat, a cup of steaming chocolat chaude cradled in his hands. His green eyes, usually so piercing, were softened by a reflective calm. His mustache perfectly aligned as he gazed at the passing fields, now bathed in the soft hues of late afternoon. Captain Hastings, seated opposite, felt a sense of closure, though the case's emotional weight lingered like a faint perfume in the air. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice low to avoid disturbing the other passengers. This case, it's one of your finest, isn't it? The locked room, the earring, the locket. You saw through it all. Poirot's lips curved into a modest smile, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. Mon ami, he replied. It was not the locked room that was the challenge, but the locked hearts. Emily Voss, Beatrice, Eleanor. They hid their truths not from me, but from themselves. The little gray cells, They merely protect a memory, but it destroyed everything she held dear. Poirot nodded, his expression tinged with melancholy. Oui, Hastings, the heart, it is a fragile thing. It clings to love, to loyalty, even when it leads to ruin. Emily's crime was not just murder, but a betrayal of the bond she cherished with Beatrice and Eleanor. The train's whistle sounded, a mournful note that seemed to echo the manor's lingering sorrow. Poirot sipped his chocolat, his gaze distant. This case, it reminds us of the danger of secrets, mon ami. They fester, they poison. Sir Reginald's threat to expose Emily was not just about theft, but about power. His power to unravel the delicate threads of their shared past. Emily, in her fear, chose a desperate path, and the locket, it was her silent confession. Hastings frowned, a final question nagging at him. But Poirot, why did Emily place the earring to implicate Beatrice? Was it spite, or something deeper? Poirot's eyes twinkled, a spark of his usual vigor returning. A good question, Hastings. Not spite, I think, but pain. The earring was a relic of their friendship, a gift from Beatrice to Emily in happier days. By placing it in the library, Emily sought to shift blame, yes, but also to cry out, to say, "You betrayed me first by casting me out." It was her heart speaking, not her reason. The train slowed as it approached a small station, the platform bustling with travelers. Poirot set down his cup, his demeanor shifting to one of quiet resolve. We have done our duty, Hastings. The truth is revealed, justice will follow. But the heart, it must heal in its own time. He adjusted his impeccable hat, his movements precise as ever. London awaits, with its order, its comforts, and perhaps a new mystery to stir the little gray cells. Hastings chuckled, rising to gather their belongings. You're insatiable, Poirot. Most men would rest after a case like this. Poirot's laugh was soft, almost musical. Rest, mon ami. The mind of Hercule Poirot, it does not rest. It seeks, it observes, it finds. The world is a stage, and I am its humble detective. As the train pulled into London, the city's familiar bustle enveloped them, a stark contrast to the cloistered world of Blackthorn Manor. Poirot stepped onto the platform, his valise in hand, his posture erect, ready to face whatever puzzle awaited next. Hastings followed.